Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We're excited you've joined us for today's session on making your marketing pop using the 5 senses. A few housekeeping details before we get started. This session is being recorded, and you should receive a link to the recording and a PDF of the slides tomorrow by email. Please feel free to share this webinar content with colleagues that could not attend today. A question and answer session will immediately follow the presentation. If you have a question for our speakers, please type it into the questions box in your GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. This webinar is hosted and sponsored by Suttle-Straus. Suttle-Straus was founded in 1910, and over 100 years our company has built up the equipment and expertise to handle almost any marketing project. We offer creative design services, web, sheet-fed and digital printing, displays and signage, direct and transactional mail, a print-on-demand technology for distributed networks, along with kitting and fulfillment. For more information, please visit us on the web at Suttle-Straus.com. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Christine Edgren is the graphic design team leader at Suttle-Straus with over 14 years of design experience, 12 of those years here at Suttle-Straus. Christine enjoys collaborating with clients on a variety of projects, seeing them through from concept to completion. Her passion for typography, design, and unique papers led her to also teach aspiring designers at Madison College. Amy Olson has been a graphic designer at Suttle-Straus since 2014. Creating beautiful designs is truly a passion of hers. Amy loves great typography, interesting layouts, hand lettering, and illustration. Christine and Amy, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can take it away.
Hi, everybody. Hello. So welcome to our webinar. We all know what the 5 senses are, right? Touch, sight, sense, sound, and taste. But today we want to talk about ways that you can incorporate those into your marketing in order to get those to really stand out. A lot of these may hit on a few at the same time, and actually I would say majority of them do. Yeah. But ultimately we hope you walk away with lots of ideas for your next marketing project. All right, let's first talk about touch. Without getting into too much detail, each finger has over 100 touch receptors. This allows us to feel even the slightest change in the surface when we run our hands over something. Changes that are so small you can't even see them with your naked eye. This should be an indicator of how important touch can be in your marketing. And in my opinion, one of the easiest ways to activate the sense of touch is by using a coating. Coatings range from dull to glossy and smooth to textured. The large example we're showing here uses soft touch coating and glossy. And then it might be kind of hard to see, but the 2 smaller examples use a much more gritty texture. Each coating has a very tactile feel all on its own, but when you pair 2 contrasting textures, that's when you can really have they really help each other stand out. It's important to consider also what type of coating you're going to use because it can say a lot about your product. For example, a lot of us would relate a soft touch to a higher quality or a luxury item. Also, kind of an added bonus of adding a coating to your piece is that they are great for protecting your direct mail when it's running through that mailing equipment. Depending on your piece, more specifically packaging, you may want to look into a laminate option. Lamination offers stronger durability than a traditional coating would. And one other thing I want to mention about this, when you are choosing a coating, it's much easier to make a glossy sheet dull than it is to turn a dull sheet of paper glossy. So this is just important to keep in mind when you're choosing your paper and when you're figuring out how you want that final product to look. And speaking of choosing paper, if you don't want to go the coating route, you can activate your sense of touch by looking at the paper options. There's so many paper options out there. This example featured a wood grain textured paper by Gamond, which in this case really paired perfectly with the sustainable messaging in the piece. There are several other types of paper you can find that feature textures that are similar to like a soft touch coating that Amy just spoke about, or even like a laid or a column stock where it has the ridges. These can portray your product in different light than just a regular plain paper.
Well, and think about when you see craft paper used, that really triggers a very specific feel in your head about what that product is going to be about.
Yeah, and consider, a coated versus an uncoated paper. So not only that, but if you want both sides to be coated, some sheets come coated one side only. And those might be great for like a packaging where you want more durability on the outside. And if you choose a coated, consider your options out there. Maybe you want a satin or a matte finish instead of glossy. It doesn't always have to have that glossy coating. Color is another way to add interest. There are so many options here too, not just one color too. You can have a duplex stock that features maybe it's white on one side, color on the other side, or color on one side and a different color on the other side. And they're just a little bit more interesting, and those might cost a little bit more, those duplex stocks, and that's just because of the time needed to produce them.
I'd like to note some of the resources we like to use for paper. Mohawk, for example, they have some really amazing color stocks. And then Nina has some texture papers that we are absolutely obsessed with. They also offer those duplex stocks Christine was just talking about. Those are just two. We use multiple resources. And a lot of those paper companies, they produce quarterly materials that you can sign up for. We recommend doing that because it's a really great way to get the latest and greatest that each of them has to offer.
And to add to that, the design on a lot of those are top-notch. We even have some hanging in our creative area for simply just inspiration.
Yeah, they're very, very good pieces to look at, not only educational-wise, but just design-wise.
Yeah, great resource. Lastly, I just wanted to say that consider the weight of your paper. This really does matter. Think about if you had a flimsy business in your car or business card in your hand. What would that tell you about that company, as opposed to maybe a thicker, heavy-duty one? Request samples too, because even the same weight can be different on a different type of sheet. So, for example, an 80-pound coated sheet can feel much different than an 80-pound uncoated sheet.
Yeah, I'll say in my past life working with executives, I found the CEO always wanted to have the super thick premium stock of business cards because when he put it in somebody's hands, they would notice it and feel its weight and heaviness, and the rest of the company could have the cheaper ones, but
yeah,
a premium feel. And
whether it's the heavy-duty stock or heavy-weight paper versus a laminate too, you could always add that laminate to that business card. So. And talking about coated versus uncoated, so often it's recommended to use a coated sheet, especially for specific techniques. And so like this one we're talking about, which is a reveal ink. So consider this to activate your sense of touch, literally. There are different types of reveal inks too that are reactive to whether it's body heat, sunlight, or even water. For this example, we printed using a thermochromic ink on our conventional press. What we did is we placed all these examples shown here on the same press sheet so the ink would be interactive for the recipient from the time they received the invitation all the way through the day of the event, like the food table tents you see.
And keep in mind, anytime you want to use a specialty ink like this, it's important to add time into your schedule. It can take several days to receive specialty inks, so just keep that in mind. And then if you're going to run tests, like we usually do for all of our specialty stuff, you're going to need to add even more time for that. Something else to consider with these reveal inks is the shelf life. The activation length for this was at least a year, but honestly, we just tested one, like I just walked back today and tested it, and it still works from being printed over 2 years ago. Another type of reactive ink, consider screen printing it versus conventionally printing it if you're looking for a less translucent reveal. This example shows more of the translucent because it was conventionally printed. Screen printing allows for the ink to lay on heavier. For example, the USPS put out a solar eclipse stamp a couple of years ago. They were awesome. They included 2 superimposed images, so one showing a total solar eclipse, and the second one showed the full moon that is revealed upon heat being applied. The stamp commemorated the 2017 solar eclipse, and actually one of our coworkers just brought one into the office the other day. Yeah, so if you think about that, those were made in 2017, and her stamp went through the mail, and it was still activating just fine. And then if this is a little more obscure for you, heat reactive ink you might be more familiar with is when you see them on cans too that show, for example, Coors Light has the blue mountains, that means the can's cold. It's the same kind of concept. That's the ink reacting to the temperature.
We still have samples of these if anybody would want one. We could send you it out. It transforms from orange to yellow when you apply.
Which I'll just say was really cool, taking it hot off the press and then taking it outside to our frigid Wisconsin cold winters. It was pretty neat to see that ink change that fast. And speaking, we talked about the USPS. Check to see if they're running any promotions. This specific kind of ink was on their list in the past to help with the mail savings. A lot of what we're going to talk about too could be applied to that.
All right. Now, almost all of you have probably come across an emboss before. There's the traditional emboss, which raises the paper up, and then deboss, which pushes the paper down. Different techniques include blind embossing, like what we're showing in the upper left-hand corner, or you can line up your emboss with your graphic, which is called a registered emboss. That's just like the Let's Talk example that uses UV spot gloss coating with the embossing. There are also other embellishments you can add. Your emboss can be domed, it can be flat, it can have a V-shaped chisel. You can even have an added pattern texture added to the emboss. The large example we're showing here has a multiple leveled emboss. You can see that the pattern is created using triangles that have been pressed in at 2 different depths. And then an added bonus is there's a clear foil inside the debossed letters to make them stand out a little more. Things that you want to consider when designing an emboss are how deep you can make that based on the weight of the paper you've chosen. The rule of thumb is whatever the thickness of your paper is, that's how thick you can push your emboss. So if you want something really deep and textured, you're going to have to choose a thicker paper. You're also going to want to avoid thin lines and small details. Those don't always translate well. And then a final production note is you should avoid having ink on both sides of your emboss whenever possible, because there's a chance that the ink on the back of your emboss is going to crack. And not only the risk of cracking the ink, but maybe that affects the image on the other side. So keep in mind side 2. So many times we might see someone want to emboss their logo on the cover of a brochure, but it maybe slipped their mind how that emboss affects the other side. So the emboss on the cover now is debossing maybe part of the president's face on the inside front cover. So it's just really important to remember both sides of your sheet when you're using this technique. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like common sense, but sometimes we just get so involved on the computer we kind of forget about how that's actually going to translate when you're looking at a 2-sided piece. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Another technique is using a raised ink, which can be produced digitally or offset and can be as thick as you want, like thermography. It does create a different sheen on your paper and can be less or more obvious depending on the type of paper you choose. But this used without color behind it is similar to a watermark that you're familiar with. And then when you add color behind it, just keep in mind that the color can alter when you're running it on a digital print production.
And like I said when we started this section, we can feel very subtle changes in texture. So even a slightly raised ink, you're going to be able to feel that, and it just adds another element to that piece.
A more familiar technique is folding. We get very excited in our creative team about folding. We could go on all day about it and get really into the nitty-gritty. It's a technique we don't see being utilized as much as it really can be. You know, we're all familiar with the roll fold. It's very traditional, but then it maybe go up to a gatefold or maybe a pop-up, which we'll show a couple more examples that speak to these. But there are so many variations and new ones being created all the time, and there really should be. They should fit your content. Think differently, maybe have how to be interactive with your marketing piece. Maybe your trifold is not horizontal, maybe it's vertical. With a small modification, you can really turn something into a unique and memorable piece. A good tip to keep in mind is that some print vendors have full die rooms, and you may be able to save some cost by using an existing die rather than purchasing a new one. It's always good, too, to confirm with your vendor, your print vendor, on maybe the panel sizes and how it folds, whether it folds with the grain of the paper. You know, all of these are good to consider for ensuring the most accurate final output.
And she mentioned you might save costs by not having to purchase a new die, but even more than that, you're not going to have any surprise hiccups when it comes to the actual folding because it's already been tried and true. You can normally, if we have a die in stock, we have a sample that goes along with that, so you can see exactly how it's going to turn out, which is reassuring, especially, you know, once you're putting all that time and money into it. And then a helpful resource we really like for folding is Fold Factory. If you visit their website, you can see and access a lot of templates for some really great folds. And then keep in mind that you can start with a fold template like those, but then modify it. Make it fit whatever your needs are for your piece.
I know I previously mentioned meeting with your print vendor, and in this case, I just have to say it's absolutely necessary. I won't bore you with the production details, but, you know, to be honest, they're actually really neat. And we can tell you more about it if you're interested. But this one was an interactive piece that really extended our message past the initial touch point. This was our version of a holiday card we sent out leading up to the new year with the top 10 marketing ideas. The piece included lots of interactive components and takeaways too. So outside of the 10-pocket accordion fold, there were fun marketing ideas within each of those pockets. So as you can see, the embossed piece we talked about earlier is shown here next to die-cut snowflake ornament that was on a pearlescent paper that the recipient could hang. Another one opened up a fun frog graphic that when the recipient folded it, it could jump. Other pieces featured a metallic ink, a chrome wallpaper, a coloring sheet to really have some fun. So keep extending your message, and that could be through multiple takeaways.
When Christine mentioned earlier using an existing die, you can't tell by looking at this one, but this piece is actually created with one 5-pocket die that was then flipped to make all 10 pockets. So what if you used our existing die, just like we did, and you featured your top 10 products? Or maybe you just use the die once and feature your top 5 ideas for your customers. We are always happy to share anything we have previously created with you.
Yeah, and to kind of go along with that, even if you're having questions about how to fit your content into a piece to have it fold the way you want it, our creative team is always open to, you know, just meeting and talking about it and kind of helping.
All right, continuing on with folding, you may or may not have received an infinity fold over the past few years. We have seen a gaining popularity in the marketing pieces that we've been receiving, and I think that's because it's a really cool piece. And once you know how it works, they're relatively easy to create, as long as you have the template, and they're super interactive, and they can even be mailed in an envelope, which is nice. If you haven't seen an infinity fold, they're rectangular or square, and they fold continuously to reveal 4 different panel spreads. The fold here shows all 4 reveals on one piece. If you're interested in seeing one, again, we'll be happy to send you one.
And I just put a link to our blog, which has a little video of it folding, so just more information on that piece specifically.
Yeah, we found that our customers are very interested in this because it's just a standout piece.
It's very interactive. And before we kind of end with folding technique, I just wanted to mention that we have a specific Pinterest board on folding if you want to check it out. There's just a lot of examples, videos, photos of how it could work.
All right, and now the next one. So another way to use a sense of touch is to simply create something people can't resist reaching out and interacting with. We created this trade show booth that used an interactive mechanism that needed to be touched in order for the attendee to receive their swag. They pulled the handle and a small car would be released and it would run down the track. And then an added interest for this design was that the gears there, they constantly spun the whole time we were at the exhibit hall. And then that motion works to spike people's curiosity and help draw them over to our booth.
And this is a great segue into our next sense, which is sight. So we are most familiar with sight and could really consider everything we're showing you guys today to be part of this category. But we felt like these next ones mostly related to these specific techniques, like this lenticular printing. This uses the same technology as like a 3D display that you might be familiar with and can give the illusion of depth or movement. And that's through the use of multiple images and lenses. This example shown here changes the message and image as you move the paper. It's a very complex process and requires a very specific vendor. So if you're interested in more information, I would just reach out to your print vendor.
And then another great visual is to create something shiny, or in this case, metallic. A metallic finish can be achieved in a variety of different ways. You can use metallic ink. You can choose a paper that has metallic flecks, like a pearlescent paper, or you can take it a step further, like the example we're showing in the upper left-hand corner. That used a glitter coating to achieve the shine. And then if you're using metallic ink, it's recommended to use a coated sheet. The ink won't soak in as much as it would on an uncoated, and that will leave it looking shinier. You can also change the appearance of metallic inks by mixing them with different basings. This is something a lot of people don't know about. But traditionally, a metallic ink is created by adding color pigments to a shade of either gold or silver. The red metallic Pantone swatch we had picked for this fireworks piece, it originally came with a gold base, but we were seeing that looked too coppery on the dark blue specialty soft touch paper we had chosen. So after running some tests, we decided to switch the basing to a silver. That cooled the color of the ink, and then it allowed us to get that red metallic we were really looking for.
And this is really a great example of why you want to work with your print vendor ahead of time, so that your final outcome really looks like what you wanted. And so with that, what Amy's talking about is through that ink testing on the actual stock, we could get it right before we went into production.
Yeah, and that was before we, ordered any inks or anything like that. If we hadn't done all that testing, we would have ended up with an orange, white, and blue piece instead of a red, white, and blue piece, which is obviously what we were going for here.
Yeah, it was almost brown.
Yeah, which was a beautiful color, but not what we were looking for. Now, if you want to get the most effective metallic shine, I'd say go with a foil. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of different foil options to choose from now. You don't have to go with just gold or silver anymore. On the large snowflake piece, they combined a clear foil along with a double embossed and a silver foil. There's a lot going on, but it's still very subtle and beautiful to look at. A few things to note about foil. Coverage is going to dramatically affect your price. You should really meet with your vendor ahead of time if you're worried about budget, just because they can help you strategize where to place your foil in order to get the most out of your dollar. And then some other things people might not know about foil is that you can bleed a foil right off the page. And you can also run a foil over a score or a fold without it cracking. And you're going to want to avoid using highly textured stocks with foil or running a lighter toned foil on a dark paper. I'm not saying you can't do these things, but if there's something that you really want to achieve, you're just going to have to do a lot of testing before you go into production.
Yeah, and to accompany testing is ask your print vendor to show you specific samples of what you're hoping to achieve. So if you want to bleed foil off the edge, or you want to, run a lighter foil on a dark stock, ask your print vendor to supply those samples to you, and then you know what the quality is going to look like.
Yeah, and the outcome might be what you're looking for, but if it's not, then you still have time to adjust. Mm-hmm. Next, we want to talk about pop-ups. Pop-ups are great visual and can be created in a lot of different ways. There's the traditional pop-up, which uses tabs and gluing to achieve a 3D effect. Think about your favorite pop-up book you had as a kid. They're usually really complex, and then they pop up when you open something. But there are other ways to create this kind of dimension that might be a little more budget-friendly. For example, the piece featured here, it uses multiple panels at different sizes and then combined a die cut and swinger folds in order to make the products look like they're dimensional in the printed space. And then they also overlap when you fold it shut, which creates additional layering. You can see that in the lower left-hand corner. Using a technique like this creates a lot of dimensions, but it eliminates the need for those tabs and gluing, and that saved us a lot on production time.
And I just have to say, I mean, it's really hard because photos just don't do this piece justice. It is absolutely beautiful, along with the coatings, but the way that it was engineered to make that product really stand apart from any other brochure you would see. If you're looking for a sample, just let us know.
And then this next piece, it functioned very similar to the last one you looked at. It used folds and varying panel sizes to create a pop-out card. But I'd also like to note that this piece is able to mail flat, and the customer chose to mail it in a clear envelope so that the recipients just couldn't resist opening it to take a closer look at it.
And speaking of envelopes, envelopes are a great technique and really can intrigue the recipient to open it, like Amy spoke about. We know everyone's familiar with the standard size white envelope, so we just wanted to highlight a couple different options. So using a clear envelope with the previous pop-up, check out this one that, you know, features a real-life carpet sample, because as the message hits on, you have to feel it to believe how soft it is, right? So, I mean, who isn't going to open that to check it?
Yeah, that's a statement piece. When you get that in the mailbox, you're going to remember it.
And sometimes maybe you don't want to show all the goods, right? So consider a showcase envelope in the upper left. This teases through a much larger window than you may be familiar with. Also, I'm not sure if you know, but you can also get these in different colors. So maybe there's one that's branded to your company, and that just really helps reinforce your brand.
And you did the research on that one. Can you get different sizes for a showcase envelope?
Yep. Yep. Another great example of showcasing your brand is printing and converting your own envelopes, similar to what US Cellular did here. And even better, they were able to include variable messaging directly on the envelope. Also, right now, a new trend in envelopes is adding an emboss and foil. Capital One boosted their direct mail response rates by adding this technique, and it's outperforming all the rest of their mailers.
And if I'm not mistaken, this particular envelope even got Megan to open it.
Yep, I got myself a new credit card and 60,000 bonus.
Yeah.
Silver foil.
It worked.
Envelope. All right, another way to incorporate sight into your piece is to manipulate what the eye is seeing. The lenticular we talked about does this through lenses, but there are simpler ways to achieve that. This example, for instance, was inspired by those decoders we used to play with as kids, if you remember those. The idea is to use red and blue ink layered together to hide a message, and that message is only revealed when the red ink is then filtered out using a red film. As you can imagine, this technique took a lot of trial and error, and we also had to order different samples of the red film until we found the one that worked the best. But in the end, everything worked perfect, and since most of the effect was created using simple inks, we were able to carry that theme across all the promotional pieces while just using that one piece of specialty film. A production note I want to point out is that we printed the black glasses frame right on the red film and then cut them out. This was just for a one-time event. We didn't need sturdy glasses frames like you think of when you go to the movie theater for 3D glasses or anything like that. That would have required additional spending on our part. So this solution was perfect for what we needed, and then it saved us quite a bit of money too.
Yeah, because we got to produce it right here in us. So we hope you have already gained some good ideas, but we have 3 more senses to go. And with scent, studies show that 75% of emotions are triggered by smell, which is linked to pleasure, well-being, emotion, and memory. So activate your sense of smell through a scented coating. This coating carries these scented nodules that need to be activated. So to get the strongest smell, it only needs a very light scratch. So keeping this in mind, it's recommended to do a spot coating versus all over. Because if you flooded a whole sheet with a scented coating, I mean, you're going to smell that through the envelope. You're really, really going to smell it. So maybe that's what you're going for, but if it's not, then yeah, you want to use the spot. And really, Christine will explain how we used it here to just enhance the message. Yeah, so this specific example featured a bubblegum scent on the gumballs within the gumball machine. But when you turn the knob, the image of the quarter on top moved, and the window below revealed a gumball with the messaging to scratch and sniff. And then, you know, ultimately the recipient then goes up to the top of the gumball machine to show those or scratch those. So this coating can be applied to a piece that has been digitally or offset printed. Again, this is recommended on a coated sheet. And then if anyone's wondering, scented coating is not going to affect the color of the ink underneath, unlike that digital raised ink we talked about earlier. And there are hundreds of scents. Make sure you like the smell, and you can, you know, request samples to make sure of that. And it may take a few days, even on a standard scent, but it will be important to reinforce your message to have it right. We actually tested this with a s'more scent on a direct mail piece a while back, a few years ago, and it didn't quite smell like we thought it was going to. Yeah, it actually smelled more like burnt marshmallow than yummy toasted marshmallow. So having tested that, then we realized we needed to go in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't know, a very popular one used actually is natural gas, and if you didn't know, it smells like round eggs. But that was used to alert people to know what it smells like and to warn them. Again, for the shelf life on this, it's, you know, guaranteed for up to a year after it's been initially activated. Okay, then another great way to invoke smell is to simply use a scent that's familiar to people. We had a booth recently at a trade show where we knew most of the attendees were going to be designers. And what do a lot of designers love? We love coffee. Knowing that, we chose to have brewed coffee right at our booth. The smell was strong and welcoming, and it really drew people in. I'll add that we also made sure to brand the coffee sleeves, right, so that when people walked around with their coffee, others would know where the coffee came from and maybe what booth to go to. There are other ways we could have incorporated scent into our booth. We could have used the scent of a campfire, or even the pine tree smell could have made people feel like they were outdoors. Other ideas that would work great in a large exhibit hall like this would be to use a strong smell like fresh baked cookies or popcorn. Most people are going to notice that smell before they can even see where it's coming from, and they're going to be drawn towards it. So going off that idea of popcorn leads perfectly into our next scent, which is sound. Can you imagine if you had heard the popcorn popping across the exhibit hall, then combine that with that familiar buttery smell, and people would have flocked to your booth? I hope some of you out there are eating lunch now, so it's making me hungry. Right. Okay, on that note, let's start with the most literal option for sound, and that is sound chips. As technology advances, sound chips are becoming more and more accessible and affordable. You can get sound chips that are preloaded with a sound that you've chosen from a sound library, or you can get some where you can just record your own message onto them. The chips we have used in the past have always been activated when you open the card, but Christine actually recently received one that works a little bit different. Yeah, so my daughter recently received a birthday card that had 2 different sound chips. So not just one when you opened it, but the second one, and the kicker was that the second one is activated by heat. And so I brought it with me today to share with you guys. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it, but so when you first open it,
So what you can't see is that there's a pop-up in the center, and they tell you to blow out your candles, and the candles are actually twinkling lights that are lit up somehow, and they're encouraging you to blow on them. So when Christine blows on them, this happens.
So it has cats yelling happy birthday to you, right?
So they're two different sound chips activated in two separate ways. Something that we haven't personally seen before.
No.
If you have seen them or have seen other awesome ideas, we would love to hear about that, but this was a really cool one that we came across.
Yeah, it was very memorable. Of course, I had to bring it into work and show everyone. Another technique to activate sound is the idea of an opening mechanism. And like a perforated zip strip, oh, sorry, I think we might have lost you guys. Had a technical difficulty here.
Try that again.
Okay, looks like we are getting back to our slides. All right. So, right there. All right, so like a perforated zip strip that requires a person to activate touch and then pull the strip, it creates a sound. The recipient gets excited, not knowing what's inside. This piece specifically was the event program for a paper show, and the attendees had to open it to get what they needed, right? So it included a tour map, sponsor information, show details, and a free drink, a value you definitely want. But think about how you could bring this into your brochure. Maybe someone could crack open a piece to reveal a message, or think about a Velcro enclosure that has a distinct sound. Maybe it's within a belly band that, goes around your materials. You could create your own package with these, or if you think about the packaging that creates the sound itself, like think about the Apple iPhone, right? So they have a specific sound that is created when you open the package. It's like suctioning.
And if you've ever opened one, you've probably noticed the suctioning sound, but you didn't think that much about it. But I can guarantee you, Apple thought about it a lot. That was very intentional. That is a sound and an experience they wanted people to have.
Yeah, and even if you look at YouTube and you look at how people actually took videos of how they open up their Apple iPhone packaging, and so you can even see that. So
I was going to mention that this particular fold was featured on last week's Fold of the Week by Trish at Fold Factory. So if you search Fold of the Week zip strip, it'll probably come up.
Cool. So whether it perforates, it rips, it zips, how about pop, right? So incorporate an item that encourages the recipient to make a sound. So like this bubble wrap direct mail piece. It can be really fun. Who can resist popping bubble wrap?
I have never come across a bubble wrap that I haven't taken the time to pop at least 25% of it. It's just an irresistible thing that we've just grown up doing.
Right.
Exciting.
So whether you're my 6-year-old or
30-something,
everyone.
Just pay off those things that you like to do too. So then, just like bubble wrap, there are other familiar sounds that can create an emotional response. For example, the familiar game board we're showing here has a distinctive clink as those tokens are dropped down and they hit the pegs. That sound evokes a sense of winning a prize, and it's a great way to catch people's attention as they walk by. Another example would be slot machines. Even though most of them nowadays are digital, they still make that traditional sound of coins dropping in or the handle being pulled. Neither of those things is actually happening on the machine anymore, but that familiarity, it just gives people satisfaction. So finding ways to use that emotional response to sound is a great way to interact with your customer.
All right, so taste. We're on to the final category. And this is probably the hardest one to think about incorporating into your print materials, but we have some good ones that we think you'll like, starting with a tip-on. So think about tipping on an edible item. It can create as a nostalgic value even for the recipient, like this example did. So here, the recipient had to perforate open the letter O within the messaging pop in order to retrieve the surprise candy. Definitely do your research for product samples and adjust, your piece based on size, and then make sure the quantity fits into what you want to have. And do your mock-ups on the actual paper to ensure the product is going to fit exactly like you want it to. In this specific example, we wanted the product to fit snug, so it didn't move while it was in transit to the recipient's mailbox.
And then the next example shows another way that you could mail that tasty treat. The holder here was designed specifically for that lollipop that the customer wanted to send. And because it fit exactly, we didn't need to tip it in with a glue dot. And that allowed us to put a CTA printed underneath that was only revealed once the lollipop was removed. I say the lollipop fit exactly, but that's not 100% true. We actually found that when we ordered a box of samples, the sticks weren't all the same length. Since we knew this ahead of time, we just adjusted our production schedule, and that allowed us a little extra time to manually trim the sticks. This was a small run, so manually trimming them wasn't a problem, but it's something you need to consider if you're running a larger one. And it's something to consider anytime you're planning a marketing piece where you're going to have an outsourced product. You don't know what kind of hiccups you're going to have.
Well, maybe you're not mailing food, but maybe you're handing it out. So think about branding your food item giveaways. So when they pull this mint container out a month from now to enjoy, they'll remember you.
You can pretty much brand any food item.
Yeah, I think so.
Custom cookies to custom bottles of wine.
Another technique includes packaging. So in lieu of tipping on a candy or food item, you can include it this way. There are so many existing packages that could be even your brand color. Take advantage of these, and then you can reinforce your message through a label or a belly band on the package. So as we see in the package on the left, the black package on the top is actually a matte finish, and it's in a pre-made box. And what we did is we printed and cut the blue logo and placed it on top for branding. And when you open it up, it reveals a tray that we designed with all the company information. And then when the tray is removed, you have the goodies below it. And then if you look to the right of the box, there's a pre-made branded blue tube that this kind of fun treats and messaging was sent to the recipient. So you can brand it through the label that's on the exterior all the way through to the inside.
And then I just want to add to keep in mind, if you're going to send chocolate to someone, just think about what time of year you're sending that and whether you're sending it in a hot area, because you could end up sending a melted pile of chocolate. So anytime you're going to send anything edible, just keep in mind the temperature that your package might get to. And then we talked about pre-made boxes, but what if that box just doesn't exist for what you want to send? If it doesn't exist, then you can really embody that package with whatever the message is you're trying to say. Our holiday card one year was centered around warmth and sharing, so we designed this package specifically to house 2 cocoa packets. One for you and then one for you to share with a friend. And since we were creating and printing our own package, we even took it a step further and used cocoa powder to hand letter our thank you, and then printed that directly onto the box.
And we have to talk about one more cool component of this piece. So we touched on extending your message further than the initial touch point. I mean, this package did that. It encouraged the recipient to pass on the hot cocoa to someone else. We also gave them a custom coaster that they could place a photo in and keep forever. So a leave behind like this really stays around all year and increases the number of impressions that your company has.
Yeah, we didn't go overboard with branding on the coaster. We just put our logo on there ever so slightly so people would remember where it came from, but we just gave them a keepsake that they would want to keep around. And then following along with that idea of creating something that reflects your message, why not also create something that reflects your brand specifically? Here, our customer needed a display for community events that they go to, and their audience is parents and their children. They're a kids' swim school. The palm tree is one of their brand elements, so they use that to create a display that holds all of these suckers, and then they can hand those suckers out to kids while the parents stand at the table and get more information about their company.
Yeah, I mean, they could have put suckers in a basket, right, and handed them out from there. But this display is a very clever alternative, and it really spoke to their brand and really made an impact.
This one, just pardon the less than ideal photo we have here. It's a little grainy from the day of event, but this is a great example not only of showcasing the treat that we're going to hand out, but it also provided a living bar graph for us to show in real time what the trade show attendees needed from us. So we asked people how our marketing resource center could help with their day-to-day tasks, and then each bar represented an answer to that question of how we can help them. People chose a response, and then they would pull the lever, and it released a handful of M&Ms for them to enjoy. So with each pull of the bar graph, it would shift slightly, and then we could see what attendees really needed from us, and they also got some delicious chocolate.
And similar to the branded coffee sleeves we spoke about earlier, we also branded the pillow boxes to allow for easier handling of the candy, and as people are walking around the exhibit hall with it, they see that logo, and then they know where to go to get their own. Also, we haven't touched much on how social media can play into your print marketing, but as we talk about choosing products for your recipients or what they like or what they would find useful, think about maybe trying to put out a poll on Facebook to integrate that, you know, to get the highest engagement from your print materials. So for example, we found through a Facebook poll, people liked chocolate more than other candies. So what is your audience like?
And then you might have noticed here that we ordered specific M&Ms that were actually one of our brand colors. So, you know, that's not necessary, but it was a nice little touch that we thought was important.
It's all the details to bring it together.
Yeah. And we've used this display multiple times. We put orange M&Ms in it. You know, it's very flexible.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to bring together everything we talked about today. This final idea features all of the senses in one package in one way or another. This package, entirely enclosed, featured a belly band that intrigues the recipient to open as the messaging says, "A gift for you." After the belly band is removed, there's a Velcro enclosure that adds an element of sound. At each reveal, a new message is displayed on each panel that speaks specifically to the product. So the products inside really evoke all the senses by touch, right? So you're unfolding your package, you have the textural eye mask, you have the stress ball, you have the scent through the lotion, the tea when those are opened, you have the taste through the chocolate, the Altoids, and the chapstick.
And surprisingly, the most commented item on this package, our customer said, was the chapstick. It was a blueberry dark chocolate Burt's Bees, and it was good. It was something that people hadn't used before, and even though it wasn't the most expensive piece in the box, it was the most talked about, so consider that.
And it's really hard to see kind of where the call to action is on the larger photo, so I tried to enlarge it down here, but underneath that chocolate bar, there is a tip-on card, and on the tip-on card has a website to visit. And when they go to the website, they can be entered to win a SAW gift card. They received a 24% response rate with this packaging, along with several follow-up like thank you comments. And so if you can see how tucked away this call to action was, and they still received that high of a response, speaks a lot to what this package was able to do for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really impressive response rate. You know, although these boxes were handed out by the customer, typically your response rate on a direct mail piece is only 2%. So if you're getting something like a 24 response rate, I mean, that's really unheard of.
And, you know, we mentioned this earlier, but keeping in mind the products you add to your package is so important, right? So one of the original samples we had to build into this package arrived very differently than what was the final order. So we had to make a little bit of adjustments and add a little bit more time, but, you know, that's something to keep in mind. And then the colors available for the product weren't all available in the same quantities we needed, so we had to adjust based on that. So some packages may feature a green stress ball and some may have a blue. So knowing that, we designed the package so that the cohesive design looked good with whichever product was placed.
So if you're not sure what scents to activate, why not just try to activate all of them like we did? But you do want to keep in mind that you need to know your audience and make sure your marketing messages make sense, whether it's direct mail or a display or a simple brochure. Just think that all through, and then anytime you're able to get your recipients to interact with your marketing, you're going to see a higher response rate and an engagement rate.
And we have so much on our social channels, but more specifically Pinterest. If you're ever looking for more ideas on activating your senses, there's videos on our page, and then you can also always request samples.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope you walk away with a lot of great ideas. Megan, you want to open it up for questions?
Thanks, Christine and Amy, for that informative presentation. We will now open it up for questions. If you have a question for our speakers, please type it into the questions box in your GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. While everyone is submitting questions, I wanted to remind you that this webinar has been sponsored by Suttle-Straus. If you're looking for a trusted vendor to help guide you through your next marketing project, please consider us and request a quote at Suttle-Straus.com. As a reminder, you will get a copy of the recording of this webinar and a PDF of the slide set. If there's any particular piece you would like more information on, we're happy to provide details, and if we have a sample, we can get a physical sample out to you. Christine, going back to the thermochromic ink, I know we did an orange color that turned to yellow when heat was applied. Can you do any colors?
Well, since we were printing it conventionally, we were actually kind of limited to only 12 colors. So we have the option of 4 color-to-color options, so that's what we chose with the orange to yellow. Otherwise, there were 8 color-to-colorless options, but you have a lot more variety if you go more of the screen printing route, depending on what you're looking at doing. So it just depends on what you ultimately want to achieve.
Yeah, what we've seen so far with the screen printing is you could print a full color image down below, and then we personally have seen a black reveal ink put over the top so that when you apply heat, the black basically disappears and then shows that ink underneath. And then I don't know if anybody's ever noticed, but like my banking checks have a heat activated ink on them, and I think those turn from like blue to red or something like that.
Yeah, or I've had the blue to colorless on security type envelopes you can add it to. So yeah.
Yeah, your colors might be a little more limited. I mean, we went with one specific vendor. I'm not sure what else is out there, but yeah, we just designed around knowing what color options we had.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Joe. He says, is there anywhere else you guys go for inspiration besides paper vendors and fold factories?
Yes. I honestly go to Pinterest a lot to find inspiration, and I actually go to Instagram too. I follow specific paper vendors or designers that I like. Those are good resources.
Yeah, if there are any, paper, shows around you, that's a great place to go because, as we mentioned before, a lot of the samples you get from the paper vendors are top-notch design, and it's because they want to push the envelope. They want to show that you can do foil emboss on this type of paper, or they are the ones that get to experiment the most with different types of stocks. So I find a lot of inspiration from them, and a lot of the design community is what they're doing and following designers, or kind of all over.
And if you can get into a print shop, they have a lot of samples too. We keep samples of a lot of stuff, even if they didn't come through creative, just our customer samples. And we have like a showcase room that you can just go in and you can look at all of those and you get to see it in your hand, and sometimes you can walk away with them. Anytime you can actually get into a shop that's working on the papers with the techniques, that's going to be a really great inspiration. And then Megan mentioned earlier too, along with Fold Factory is Trish's Fold of the Week. We check that out all the time.
Yes, you sign up for her email.
Yeah. She does one once a week, and she focused specifically on folding, but some of the stuff that gets sent to her is stuff I have never thought of before. So that's a great one too.
All right, well, that's all the time we have today. I'm going to put a challenge out to all you marketers on your next project. Think about how you can integrate maybe one more sense into something you're planning, whether it's your trade show booth or your next marketing piece. How can you go beyond just sight to add one of the other senses in?
Yeah, and feel free if you ever want to talk about it or get ideas. Our creative team loves to hear them or just help. So
if you have more questions you didn't have a chance to ask, you can email them to marketing@Suttle-Straus.com and we can get back to you. Otherwise, watch your email tomorrow for a link to the recorded presentation and PDF slide set. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.